In the context of the male predators that I was speaking about at the beginning of the course, there's a word that keeps getting used, and that is the word of disgraced. And disgrace takes us to another word, which is the concept of shame. And this idea that there is something innately wrong with me, and for that reason, I'm not lovable. So anytime that I encounter parts of myself that are socially unacceptable, parts that I have needed to reject, but they still happen to be there because I can't make them go away, I hide them away from everybody to keep them from rejecting me, but still, at the least desirable moments in time, those people, those character traits will resurface. I feel shame about part of who I am. People cause me to feel shame when they look at me and judge me for being a particular way. And within that is this dynamic of a lack of worth based not on what we do, but on who we are. And if there's anything separative, let's say it another way, there's nothing that can be more separative than that perception of shame, that I am unworthy of connection. And it's that piece that lies behind so much of the abuse, because for a person who has internalized that shame, there's nothing that they can do for connection. And yet, they're craving connection. So essentially, it's being put into this place of always being that 1 week old that unable to connect to mommy, unable to reestablish that connection. And then when the connection gets closer to being established, the person then is reminded of how shameworthy they are, how unlovable they are. And again, it can never be fulfilled. It can never escape from this cycle of shame until one does all of the kind of work that I invite people to do with teachers like myself. But extend that into the lives of sexual predators. And what you begin to get is a little bit of the understanding of the motivation that they're feeling to somehow connect. They know that they're unworthy of connection. They're loathsome to themselves and through the as they see themselves through the eyes of others. And what they've done are things that are loathsome, that deserve to be disgraced. So there's a craving for connection, and at the same time, the inability to ever be connected. And it leads to acts of desperation, a grasping for anything that will create a momentary semblance of connectedness. And that is where a person's power begins to get directed, to creating situations that will somehow alleviate that disconnect of suffering, that isolation, that I am unlovable, even if it's just for a moment, because it's so excruciating to be in that place. So when we get to witness and to hear the testimony of the people who've been the victims of this kind of abuse, my heart goes out to the victims, because this is absolutely horrific. The experiences that people that we're having at the hands of abuse, and we're gaining an understanding of what prevents the abuser from not being abusive. And underneath everything is that need to feel connected. So if we're not going to be decapitating or hanging or otherwise removing these people from our society, we need to come up with something that is going to enable them to stay alive and to be able to be healed and non-harmful within the society. So here are the remedies that I suggest. The remedies are to look at the source of where the abuse comes from, to understand that at the heart of, I'm going to say, all of the abuse that we get to witness and experience and hear about and be a part of in one way or another is this longing for connectedness. If we recognize that that is the cry for help, that abuse is the cry for connectedness, when a person can't get their connection needs met because of wounding that they internalized from 1 week old, it shifts the way that we deal with people in this situation. Because by creating environments where they can feel lovable, we want to neutralize them from creating any more harm. We want to isolate them so they no longer pose a threat to society, and we ideally would like to bring them back into society if they no longer pose a threat. So for them to be able to get from the threat to non-threat, what they need to be able to do is to shift that perspective, that sense of themselves, to one where they're able to accept and to love themselves, where they no longer require that connectedness to something outside of themselves. So they become independent of the mommy, daddy who wasn't there for them, and instead have been able to find a replacement, and ideally the replacement where the love comes from inside them, so they're not dependent on anyone outside of themselves. At that point, if a person can get to that place, someone who has been abusive, they no longer pose a threat to society. In fact, they become a model for other people who haven't had as traumatic a journey to get to a place of acceptance and self-acceptance. So as parents, conscious parents who are trying to break the cycle, or someone supporting parents, whether that's as a teacher or medical staff or mental health or a friend or anybody who would like children to be raised in a different way, what we need to support parents and encourage parents to do is to become aware of that role that disconnection plays in the acting out of their children, of our children. And we can't stop it because we're always going to have to use the washroom. We're always going to have to take care of other siblings. We're always going to have to take care of our needs. There will always be times when a child is crying and doesn't help get their needs met. But when we're able to do a repair after that's occurred, and to hold that child with our full attention, being fully present, so they know that we are connected to them, that they are connected, it diminishes, it raises them to know that after disconnection comes connection. And it may take months or years for them to get into that place of healing those early wounds, developing that ability to know that not only are we conscious that they were in that distress, but we can recognize that we've had that distress as well, and we can do our very best to reassure them that even when we're not available, they're still lovable, they're still worthwhile. There's a point in their development when children begin to at least hear that message, and it increases their ability to, it reduces the amount of stress. It begins to take down the pain of separation.